So what I'm going to focus on is, or continue the conversation about peer tutoring, and then revisit some of the topics from chapter 6, talking about a little bit more about PSI, self-management, and some of these more advanced repertoires. Okay. He said that you guys had, he had you kind of, it sounded like in the middle of an activity on peer tutoring. Is that, was I understanding him correctly? No? I think blank faces.
We did an activity on PSI.
It was on PSI?
Yes, that's what we spent a lot of time on.
Okay. How did, what was he targeting there? And I'll see if I can pick up from there. I don't want to duplicate too much.
The activity that we did was he gave us like 15 minutes to kind of create like our own PSI kind of folder, just either on paper or in a document, just kind of made that. And then, just like time permitting, a few of us like presented that and we kind of discussed that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. And so that you got a little bit more through peer tutoring and PSI, or just the PSI?
I think like the majority of like at least that last half of class was really just like PSI focused.
Okay, cool. So I think what I will do then for tonight is, instead of talking specifically about any one of those things, we're going to talk more about the classroom as a whole that utilizes these types of strategies and how they all kind of fit into the big picture. All right. Oh, I know the other piece that he was saying that goes along with that is the more large scale advanced systems of reinforcement. All right. So that's kind of what we'll talk about today. So first of all, when we're talking about a classroom that is utilizing PSI, that is utilizing peer tutoring, that it's utilizing these advanced systems of reinforcement, that's utilizing self-management, we're talking about classrooms that have kids with a lot of skills, right? You're not going to be able to use a true PSI system, a true peer tutoring system, a true self-management system with kids that are missing significant vocal or verbal repertoires. So we do have to understand that there are going to be that children with more repertoires are going to have access to ways of learning that other children are not necessarily going to be able to contact. And for those of you who are in clinical settings, especially those of you who are working with some of those kids that have more limited or faulty repertoires, it's harder to accept that some of those kids may not, that this type of instruction may not be appropriate for those types of kids. I've definitely been in clinical settings. I've been in self-contained settings where teachers and clinicians are trying to implement like really basic forms of PSI when you're talking about file folders and activity schedules, those types of things, where they're trying to do, I don't know if peer tutoring per se, but having the child instruct the line tech or the clinician and be kind of in charge of that type of learning. And I'm not trying to say that there aren't benefits to implementing those types of systems in a lower VB classroom, but understand or make sure that you understand that one is topographical, one is putting in the form of the thing, the other is putting in the function of the thing. And what we're talking about tonight when we talk about these systems is putting in place the system that has functionality. All right. And when you're looking at, I think the three that really work together are PSI, advanced systems of reinforcement, and self-management. When you have those three things together, you have a really advanced question. Classroom. Sorry, I just saw Taylor's question. Yeah, so difference between PSI and busy work was a shocker for me in my location. The two terms are used interchangeably, but that's not the case. Absolutely, and that's exactly what I'm talking about here. Where and I don't want to say. Let's look at it in three separate ways. You have lower VB kids who have file folders. There is a function to that, teaching them to independently work through a set of known skills, or long-term move through a series of possible reinforcers is a very valuable skill, right? But then when that turns into an older kid who opens up a file folder and in the file folder is matching colors, that's not functional, right? So that's the busy work, right? That's that Taylor's referring to, where PSI is actually learning. The learn unit is necessary in PSI. Otherwise, it is a maintenance folder. It is a busy work folder. That is very, very much the case. So when you have a system that uses all three of those pieces, you have your most advanced learners. As a second grade teacher, I can tell you I had kids with self-management and a straightforward advanced system of reinforcement. When you got to the fifth grade classroom, you had independent learners. These were learners who, so when you talk about the PSI, that you guys kind of developed last week, I'm sad that I wasn't a fly on the wall and for that conversation. But the most advanced PSI developed that I have seen was in that fifth grade classroom, where you would have a set of directions. All right, so let's say the children had all read a book. You'd have a set of directions. You would have essay examples, writing samples that would have particular parts notated or highlighted for specific details or just specific components of the essay that particular writing sample did particularly well. And then you would have a prompt to write an essay. So you would have the background knowledge of the text and how to write. You would have these samples. You would have the prompt the child would write, and then for the correction procedure, it could have been somewhat of a match to sample specific to that prompt. So you could have given a couple more sample essays that had critical components of the essay, plus a rubric. So did your essay talk about this? Yes or no? Could it have been more developed? And you're scoring your own rubric as you go, and all the way down. Our read through for grammatical errors. How many grammatical errors did you find? If you had 10 or fewer, give yourself this score, so on and so forth. What that class did, so that's the completion of the Learn unit in totality within a PSI format, right? You have the prerequisite skills, you have the antecedent, you have the modeling, you have the behavior, and you have the correction and reinforcer, all without the interaction with a teacher. So that is a large activity or a large skill that is a learning skill that is all encompassed within that personalized instruction. All right. In the fifth grade classroom, what they decided to do was, instead of having that correction or the consequence be, hang on 1 second. Okay, cool. instead of having the consequence be a part of the PSI system, that's where that teacher switched to a peer tutoring system. So at that time, they started typing their essays into Google Docs, which was pretty much new at the time. And they were able to give feedback on it through Google Docs. And they would go back and forth with the peer tutoring. That peer tutoring system was managed independently by the students. So the peer tutoring was nested within the PSI system. All right. So when you start to look at it that way, you start to see how the different pieces can fit together. Now, what does it take to manage something like that? Well, it takes a robust set of self-management skills. It takes a robust set of self-monitoring skills, and it takes a reinforcement system that is highly developed, has access to a wide array of reinforcers, and is meaningful to the students. All right? That should not sound like a simple token system. That should sound like something that is individualized to the individuals, to each student, because their own instructional history, their own community of reinforcers, their own EOs are going to govern what they are working for, with, and how on any given day. In a 5th grade class, what would you imagine to be some of the top reinforcers? If you were imagining your utopian 5th grade class, what would you imagine those students wanting to trade in for?
Computer time.
Computer time.
I was thinking it. I didn't want to say it though.
Okay.
Or like some sort of free time in itself.
Okay.
Where like they can choose, like just a demand-free time, really.
Good. What else?
Extra outside time.
Outside. All right. Good. Good. What else?
Reading. I mean, I was that 5th grader that wanted to always read.
So reading was the most preferred reinforcer. Yes, there was computer time. Yes, there was outside time. This was before iPads were worth anything. There were some games. Yes, there was some drawing. But anytime you walked into that class, there were at least 2 kids sitting in the back that had traded in for reading. All right. So when we're talking about an advanced community of reinforcers, that's the level that we want to be thinking about. Okay. How we get there is not magic, but it takes a lot of structure and a lot of time, right? It takes this process that has to start really in the kindergarten, 1st grade levels to build up to be able to put all of that together. So if we look at self-monitoring, peer tutoring, PSI, and advanced systems of reinforcement, do you guys think that is there a hierarchy? Is there a structure for how that classroom is built? What do you guys think? If you had to pick, you're coming in, you know where you want to go, you know where you want to be. You're a kindergarten teacher, 1st grade teacher. You know what you want these students as 5th graders to be able to do. What am I working on day 1 in order to get them there? Where do I start? Where do you start?
Identifying reinforcers.
Okay. Good. Good. So Taylor, you're thinking that the first step is going to be developing the reinforcement system so that you can start to build on that and expand on that. Right? Okay. Any other thoughts?
Procedure comes to mind.
What was that? Say that again.
Procedure.
Okay, good. What is procedure tied to? Which of those four things is procedure tied to? Reinforcement system, PSI, self-management, and peer tutoring.
I would say PSI.
I don't think PSI.
Self-management.
Self-management. Exactly. Heather, I'm looking at you because I'm thinking of a client that we used to share, who had a great community of reinforcers and had no self-management skills. He was an older kid, very verbal, very, very, very verbal, lots of behaviors. His system of reinforcement had been developed. That wasn't a problem. He could manipulate any system of reinforcement, any type of token style system that we threw at him. He could work through that. But he did not have the self-management skills. And especially in those moments where behavior was ready to explode, he did not have the skill set to work through that. And so procedure, that as a word, that fits in the school setting, because when you're talking about self-management in schools, you're really talking about, navigating through the classroom, transitioning, walking through the hallways, that kind of stuff. But starting to develop, I think, I agree with the two places that you landed, self-management and your reinforcement systems kind of simultaneously. Those have to be the building blocks upon which that more advanced classroom is going to develop. All right. That leaves you with peer tutoring and PSI. My question for you guys is, are those two, and we'll come back to self-management and those reinforcement systems in a sec, but are those two things related? Are they independent? Are they hierarchical? How do you guys view those things?
Well, okay, I'll give it a shot. Well, I read in the book, Dr. Shanman, that the PSI was utilized as peer tutoring for test taking. I guess it would be an advanced, or for test monitors or test markers. I'm not, did I answer your question? So
I think you started to, so kind of directly relate those two. What is the relationship between peer tutoring and PSI? How do you view that? What is your interpretation of what that relationship is?
well, okay, that's a good, oh man, I think that's a good question, and I'm trying to think about that. But so I think I think of cooperative learning, but that's also terminology they used in the book, which I recalled. So years ago, I guess I'm thinking about cooperative learning to be kind of like peer tutoring and PSI together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. What else?
I'm stuck on trying to figure out how to relate them together, because PSI is so independent, whereas peer tutoring requires another person.
Okay. Good.
Would you apply both of them at the same time? Or I feel like PSI should come before peer tutoring, just because they have to almost be in control of themselves before they can teach somebody else, kind of. I don't know exactly how to explain it.
Okay. So I think that's an interesting perspective. So you have, and I was coming at it from the opposite direction, but I think that but I think I know where you're coming from. So from a self-management standpoint, I think it's working independent of a teacher needs to be shown basically before you can be trusted to work with a friend without a teacher, right? That's basically what you're saying, Heather, right? If I'm understanding you correctly, like if I can't trust you to sit by yourself and read for 5 minutes, there's no way I'm going to stick you with a friend and walk away and expect anything to happen, you know? So from a self-managed, go ahead.
I think I'm thinking more of the client that you were talking about, just
Okay.
the process that we had to teach things in order for it to function in a way that, well, in a way that was functional for both children.
Okay. And so what's interesting, let me say what I was thinking ahead before, and then see how that ties in to you, all right, or to what you're thinking. I was looking at it as peer tutoring more of a prerequisite for PSI, but I was thinking at it from not necessarily from a self-management standpoint, but from a reinforcement standpoint. So I'm getting way ahead of myself, like a year ahead of myself right now. But last night in our verbal behavior class, we were talking about speaker's own listener. And that is not a repertoire that I expect you guys to be 100% comfortable with discussing right now. So don't worry about that. But in order to contact the correction procedure in PSI, you have to be able to read your own writing or listen to your own speaking, right? You have to be able to have that conversation within yourself. What peer tutoring does is it allows for a similar voice as your own to provide that correction or to provide that reinforcement. All right. When a teacher provides a correction to you or reinforcement to you, they're providing that consequence in such a way that will advance your understanding. So there is learning happening, there is advanced learning happening in the feedback that is given. That is very different feedback than the feedback that you would get from a peer, right? If you have, for some of you are probably already in these groups. If you're not, you will be sooner or later. But if you're in one of the studying for the BCBA exam Facebook groups, those are communities of peers. Those are not communities of professors, right? Those are communities of people who are thinking and speaking the same way that you are, which allows you the opportunity to hear to vocally hear yourself back at you. So I think what peer tutoring can do, and in terms of speaker's own listener behavior, we talked about conversational units, and conversation with a peer teaches you how to listen to your own voice as opposed to listening to another adult voice. Because those are two different stimuli, right? The words are different, the language is different, the functions are different, how you perceive it is different, the reinforcement is different. So all those things are going to impact how you contact that relationship, right? So I feel that from a reinforcement standpoint, what peer tutoring allows you to do is contact corrections from someone other than a teacher. Teachers have there's this assumption in students that teachers are thinking of things a different way. And they're there to teach you how to think that way. When you hear a peer, the reinforcement is, oh, I have that thought. Oh, I was saying that. Oh, I just need to say it this way. And that starts to reinforce that thinking and listening to oneself, such that you can contact that correction without a teacher later on in PSI. Now, that is a complex way of looking at or making a decision on which comes first, PSI or peer tutoring. I think that the much more parsimonious explanation is that there are components of peer tutoring that are prerequisite to PSI. And there are components of PSI that are prerequisite to peer tutoring. And when they are taught together, they probably can develop together. And then you get to this point where they are divergent skills, and then you're off and running, right? But I think being able to look at each of those different pieces from multiple directions will help you individualize and identify which students are ready for what skills or what practices at what point.
Mm-hmm.
So with peer tutoring, in the class I'm in, we have 2 kids that would be capable, essentially, of tutoring or starting it. Problem is, student A, everything about peers is reinforcing. Doesn't matter who it is, every single thing is reinforcing about them. So the reinforcement is going to be built in just from the social interaction for him. The other peer is not reinforced by peer A in any way, shape, or form, because when peer A admits his aberrant behaviors, he targets him. So the only 2 kids capable, like we would love to see it attempted in the class, is just how do we overcome the peer not being reinforcing? Because we've had this same issue with this student when he was in another class, where at first every kid wanted to, we would go be like, all right, we're going to do some peer tutoring, we're going to do this. Every kid wanted to be with him. But once he started emitting aberrant behaviors, nobody wanted to come.
So I'll give you a very, very quick answer. The first step is don't do peer tutoring. And if we look at what we spoke about before in terms of hierarchy, what I would say is that relative to peer tutoring or these higher learning constructs, those children's community of reinforcers is faulty, right? Now, you may look at the kid who likes all peers to, regardless, and say, this is great, but that's going to be to a fault, right? So you are not necessarily, when you have a learning contingency and the reinforcement control isn't in the correct response, you are not going to be able to teach things. Does that make sense? So if the reinforcement control is in the presence of the peer, then the EOs that govern learning, whether it's with adults or peers, are not in play, because just by being there, they're contacting reinforcement. All right. I'll give you another example that's at a little bit simpler level. I sat down to do a naming project with a little girl, and I did this probe set, and it was dogs. And I went through just to see if she knew the names of the dogs, and her response to each card was doggy, 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 and her eyes lit up and she had this super excited voice, and I was thinking, oh, this is great. She has no idea what these are called. Went through our MEI set, went back to the probe set. What happened? Doggy, doggy, doggy. The reinforcement was just in the fact that she was looking at a dog and got to say dog. There was no attending to the critical stimuli to acquisition. There was no EO because she was already contacting her reinforcer. All right. So same type of thing in your situation, Taylor, with the kid who likes all things peers, is you're not going to be able to shape any behavior, teach any behavior. It doesn't matter what they're doing. As long as they're next to the peer, then they're happy. The only way to create a contingency would be to remove the peer contingent on an incorrect response, which is not, like, is clearly not what you want to do, right? So conditioning the EO for correct responding such that that is equal or greater than the EO for being with peers is where you would need to go there. And that's, you know, next level stuff.
We had the same issue with this student with observational learning, where we even tested it. We didn't have to have the yoke contingency board out to run it. Just the fact that he was working with a peer was all he needed. It didn't matter what was going on. The peer, we actually had one session where the peer was like, I don't want to be here. And he was like, I'm so happy you're here. I love that we're working together. And it's just constant. And it's like, by the end of the session, his peer actually was like, can I go now? And like, out the room. And then he was just like, I got to work with such and such. Like, that's all that mattered. It wasn't even the fact that, oh, well, like, he was learning through the observation. Like, there was nothing. It was just his
So
presence.
I think that's a really, really good example of why that's a problem, right? So you have in that situation, and this goes back to that hierarchy that we spoke about, you have an underdeveloped community of reinforcers such that learning isn't a reinforcer. The things that you're working for are not reinforcers. Other stimuli in the environment are not functioning as a reinforcer when peers are there. Therefore, if you're non-contingently accessing the peer, nothing else matters. So it doesn't matter that the peer was like, I want to punch you in the face. I'm just sitting next to you, therefore I'm contacting reinforcement. All right. And then on the other side, it sounds like your peer is more appropriately responding to the peer one, the target student that likes peers. If that's, if that friendship is being punished, right? I get assaulted. I don't want to be next to you. So in that situation, there are other reinforcers and EOs that need to be conditioned for that first kiddo before you can put them in a peer tutoring situation. And the other kids have to develop a new instructional history so that they're not afraid of the first kid, right? So I think that having both of those components, that self-management and that community reinforcement, are necessary for either peer tutoring or PSI to be successful. Both need to be in there. Both need to be in place. All right. So from a building up standpoint, when we look at when we look at, let's start with advanced systems of reinforcement. So how do we go from the token systems that we're all very comfortable with, our 10 token, little colored discs, whatever it's going to be, to let's go all the way. How do we get from point A to a financial system as our token system? Obviously stopping at the appropriate 4th, 5th, 6th grade level, right? So when I say financial system, our paychecks are our tokens, right? We can trade them in for lots of different things. How do we get from A to Z? So let's assume we've conditioned tokens. We understand trade-ins. We have a strong community of backup reinforcers, but we're still on physical tokens. How do we make the jump to the more advanced token system that leads to that high level governing of responding. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do something I think similar to what Dr. G did last week. I'm going, let's see, there are 11 of us here. So I'm going to break you into, I'll do 3 groups, so 4, 3, and 4, and spend about 10 or 15 minutes having conversation about what are the markers, what are the STOs. It doesn't have to be every little step, but what would be the process to get from a physical token system into that advanced system that is widely governed by many reinforcers. Okay, does that task make sense? Cool. All right, 3 groups. Go ahead. Two of your groups were excited to get out of there. One group's still talking. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Still missing 3. Let's go. All right, we are all back. Okay, who wants to share? Where did you guys, what were some of your thoughts? No, I'm not looking for anything specific. I have my thoughts and ideas, but I want to hear what you guys have to come up with. What do you guys think? Go ahead, Taylor. You unmuted yourself. I see everything.
Oh God. Okay. So I had brought up like one of the possible next steps being where they still have essentially a token economy just with the checkboard, but the prices of the reinforcers varies. So like the most potent things, for example, with my client, the most potent being an iPad, she has to earn 25 checks, but she has a pretty wide variety, a community of reinforcers. She doesn't man for bubbles very frequently, but she likes bubbles. So she mans that she wants to work for bubbles, then she might only need 5. So she'll come into contact sooner with those.
Awesome. And there's one critical component of what you're describing versus our typical token board. What can you or anyone else identify what that is? I know
Like
that was a
that's
very
different?
big. Say that again.
Are you saying like what's different?
Yes, there's one critical piece that's different between a token board and what you just described that I think is 100% accurate to what we're talking about and really key.
The price vary, the amount needed varies.
Exactly.
Compared to it was a correction I got from Javen. He was like, she shouldn't be working for 10 every single time. We need to have something varying.
Good. So the way that I don't know if this is a technical term or not, but I refer to them as closed reinforcement systems versus open reinforcement systems. So when you have a closed system, you get to 10 tokens, and then what do we want to trade in for? In an open system, and you, Taylor, what you're describing is, I think, a halfway step between a closed system and a truly open system. So the halfway step is it's open depending on which reinforcer you want to trade in for, right? So it can expand as high as you want to go or as low as you want to go, depending on which reinforcer you want. An open system, a truly open system, has no specified time at which you trade in reinforcers. So you just keep collecting reinforcers, and when there is a trade-in time, you see how many you have, you see what you want. If you have enough, you buy the thing, right? We don't say, okay, when I have $100, I'm going to go to the grocery store and do my grocery shopping for the week. We go to the grocery store whenever we damn well please, and however much we have limits what we can purchase, right? So that is a truly open system. All right. And what you're describing, I think, is a great bridge between the token board and that truly open system, because that open system is like that would be way too big a jump. Good. Good. What else?
So like
Yeah, go ahead.
mini mart, the classrooms that have like mini mart system where like they give dollars, because mini marts typically at a set time, it's not a truly open system.
In a school setting, you have to fake that time a little bit. So like you can't go hypothetically to the grocery store while you're at work, right? So we define times that are trade-in times, just as we have socially acceptable trade-in times. I can go run an errand on lunch break. I can't go run an errand in the middle of the meeting. So that's the equivalent there. So I think that mini mart system with designated trade-in times is pretty darn close to an open system. I would consider that an open system. All right, good. What else? What are some other ideas you guys have?
What are you doing here? We speech to write. Yes, but we were supposed to do it over the phone. That was the plan. Well, it's a ridiculous plan. We have to put two speeches together. We have to rehearse them, all our timing. None of that can be done effectively over the phone. But it was your idea. Oh,
Someone's Shelby. Gotcha. All right, there we go. You are unmuted. All right. What other thoughts? What are some other steps from your basic token board to your bigger systems?
Can I go again?
You can. Yeah, sure.
The next system we were actually talking about was the using dollars. Like they're constantly like it could be, doesn't have to be real dollars, of course. We'd go broke, but like a dollar system, and then having that mini mart trade-in time where they can purchase something.
Okay. What is the significant? Obviously, there is a long-term significance of using dollars. But what is the significance of going from the token to the dollar?
I'm not exactly sure, but what I'm in my head, what I'm thinking is one thing that we talked about. I was in Taylor's group too, but one thing we did talk about with that was, the fact that it does also at the same time teach, life skills using actual money. And I mean, I know teaching a self-contained class like I do, like that's something I emphasize a lot. So moving from the tokens to actual money would, encourage more life skills. I'm not sure what exactly you were going for though.
Yeah, no. So that's like 95% of what I was going for. And I actually love that you qualified that you're in a self-contained class, and that the tact that you used was life skills. I think that the way you said that is perfect. Not everyone is going to need life skills, but and I'm thinking at a higher level, they might need curricular skills. Okay? So when we go from the token into the bigger thing, we want to use the bigger thing as something that is meaningful, that is either applicable in life, like you're talking about, or applicable to the curriculum. One of those, that is the next bridge that we want to gap that we want to bridge. So the sequence, and I don't have it perfectly. I always forget what third grade did, but in the Morristown school system, what we work together, kindergarten used coins, which was a kindergarten math skill. First grade used tallies. Tallies were the first grade math skill. I used bundles of 10. Counting by tens within 1,000 was the second grade math skill. I forget, like I said, I forget what third grade used. Fourth grade used decimals. Fifth grade used fractions. So you had fifth graders who were getting 3/4 of a point and 5/6 of a point and 1/8 of a point. And at the end of the day, they had to add up all their points.
Fifth grade would not have been reinforcing to me. Oh, no,
And-
not fractions.
But what I want you to think is, what does that do, not just to the token system, but to the curricular skill or the life skill as itself, in a whole. So Taylor, what you're describing is exactly the opposite, or what your reaction there is the exact opposite of what happens. So what ends up happening is you have kids that have powerful EOs for their reinforcers. And I'm not saying that this applies to you, but so don't,
Okay.
not meant as an insult. You have kids that have powerful EOs for prosthetic reinforcers and have limited EOs for curricular material. All right, so now we're gonna get out our pre-mac and our matching law, and we're gonna mash them together. And what happens? You have these really, really high EOs to access stimuli by our underperforming kids. And to access those stimuli, they have to perform a task that they really don't have the prerequisites for, right? They're not good at math. But if they want to access those things, they have to learn. So what happens? They basically place themselves under deprivation because it's too high effort a response. The response effort doesn't change, but the EO every single day that they don't add up their fractions gets higher and higher and higher. As they're watching the other 20 kids trade in their points and play with these toys, they're getting more and more motivated. And what they will do at that point is they'll man for help, and now they'll actually be patient and wanting to learn because the EO is finally appropriate. All right. So through that, you're actually, and through that process, you went from exactly what you're talking about, which is the possibility of conditioning the math as it feels like you would be conditioning the math as aversive. All right, but the math is already aversive. What's happening is the EO for the backup reinforcers is stronger than the punishing properties of the math stimuli. All right, so as that EO gets stronger, you actually start to condition the math. And then as soon as you contact that first reinforcement, the amount of effort for that response just decreased. It gets easier and easier and easier.
So at what point do you have to say, all right, we have this much, we need to add up and trade in, because it's a extensive amount?
Yeah. So
I can see some of our kids that are kings and queens of escape behavior just be like, all right, I'll sit here. Being alone is reinforcing in itself, so I'll just sit here.
Okay, so that's progressing to the next step in the token system. All right, which is, for me, and I apologize if one of you has this on your paper, but is individualization. All right, so in a class-wide system, you have to have individualization. So where one kid, first of all, let me clarify. if you have a kid that emits tons of escape behavior, it's probably not going to be the case that they're going to have tons of points to appropriately escape. Okay, so that's probably not going to be too much of a concern. But you can start to manipulate how many points are given based on the appropriateness of their response. So if I have a child who's a struggling reader, but they're trying really, 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 really hard, they're going to be getting points after points after points after points after points to keep them going. Right now, there are some other issues in there that we can talk about. Versus my kid who's a strong reader, who's going to pick up, my first grader who's going to pick up Harry Potter. He's not getting any points for that. He's not getting any points for that at all. It's already a reinforcer. It's already a reinforcer. So we don't want to say that all kids are being treated equal and are going to be contacting the same level of reinforcement. All right, different, well, I won't draw the analogy that far. But being able to have different point values for different tasks, for different individuals at different times of day that can be delivered on a variable schedule, not a fixed schedule. Stop delivering reinforcement on a fixed schedule. That point just interrupted my own thought process. Sorry. Anyway, you start to create this environment where there are points going out all over the place. You never know when you're going to get points. You never know how many points you're going to get. But the trick is that there's two pieces here. Every next response has the possibility to contact points. And there's always something that I want to trade those points in for. All right. There are two extremes in a classroom in this situation. You have one extreme where you have your child who has a limited community of reinforcers, where they're not motivated by the points because nothing that they can trade the points in for is anything that they want. All right. So we have to work with that student to identify what their reinforcers are and find an appropriate point system or token system for them to operate on. The other extreme is the child who doesn't care about any of the reinforcers. They just want to see their points go up. So the token itself is the reinforcer. I had one girl when I was teaching who, I mean, school was the greatest thing for her. And I had limits on how many points you could save. We had a big party at the end of the week to count up all her points and transfer it over to the next data sheet, yada, yada, yada. And she had been hiding her data sheets from me and carrying over points longer than she was supposed to. And in a class where on a given day, a good day, you'd probably get 400 to 500 points. On a great day, maybe you get 1,000 points. Trading in was 200 points. iPad and computer was 4,000 points. So it managed, and then everywhere in between. She had something like 20,000 points. And I said, you got to use some of those. You can't do that. She's like, well, can I have an amount that you allow me to use, but can I keep adding them up? Because I just like seeing the number get higher. And I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. For her, she was never going to use those points. She was never going to use those 8,000 or 10,000 points. She just wanted to see how many points you can get. That was the reinforcer in and of itself. I'm going to behave so I can get the tokens so that I can see that number go up. If any of us are ever in the fortunate position where we no longer have to work and we get to sit and watch our bank account just go up and up and up and up and up, then that's what that is. I don't want to get into some political debate, but when you have the uber rich who are arguing about their taxes and this and whatever loopholes and whatever, their reinforcer is seeing their bank account go up and up and up and up. There's no meaning to any of that, right? It's not so they can trade in for the next house or the next yacht or the next, jet stream or whatever. It's just to see the number go up. That is their condition reinforcer. So when you are in a classroom, you are going to have kids on that entire spectrum. You are going to have kids that have too limited a community of reinforcer, and you are going to have kids where the reinforcers don't matter. The points themselves, the token itself, is the reinforcer, and all of that is okay. The power of these advanced token systems or reinforcement systems is that they can be adapted for every single one of those students. All right. Are there any questions about that? Any thoughts about that? Were there any other ideas that were talked about in any of your groups that you guys want to share? We only heard from one group. All right, we're quiet tonight. Okay, so what then is the relationship between the advanced token system and our self-management system? What is the interaction between those two systems going to be? And CC mentioned procedure, Taylor said reinforcement systems. I agreed with both of those things, that they need to be developed together, but they don't get developed as their own strands. They don't get developed as their own LTOs. They interact with each other. How do they interact with each other? What are some of the ways in which they might interact with each other?
For like the token systems, allowing the child to give their token instead of like the teacher or the tech.
Okay, good. So if you have a token system, let's say it's an open token system, but it is still in physical tokens. So I, the teacher, have a cup of tokens, and you, the student, have your cup of tokens that are yours that you've earned. And I say, good job, give yourself a token, and you grab one out and put it in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's a level that we're all comfortable with. When I was teaching, like I said, groups of 10 points in terms of 10 were, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, were what I would give out. I had 25 kids in my class. Do you think I was running around giving 10, 20, 50, 100 points on writing them down on everyone's point sheet? No. I would say, kid 1, give yourself 20 points for this behavior. Kid 2, give yourself 100 points for this behavior. And they would be able to write it down. All right. So understanding that they have ownership of or responsibility for recording their own tokens. All right. So that's an interaction between them. Excellent. What else?
And I guess not just the recording and being the one to, give those tokens to the teacher, but just being okay, there's all these different reinforcers in the classroom. This is worth 4,000. This is worth 2,000, and like being able to add up what they already have and what they're able to spend. Like, just, I guess if that makes sense, like they're seeing
so,
what they have to spend, how much more they need to get what they want, things like that.
Okay, so the way that I want you to look at that is managing their own establishing operations. All right, so if I have let's go back to that, let's say it's 500 points to trade in for coloring, 1,000 points or 2,000 points for extra recess, and 4,000 points for computer. And I have a kid who's got 150 points, and they get up and they say, I want to trade in for computer. And I say, you can't, you don't have enough points. And they blow up. They have a meltdown, right? I'm sure that's happened for many of you. Yeah. So they're not able to self-manage their EOs. I should not be thinking about computer because I should see I'm nowhere near that, right?
Or at least be able to accept no when told, like,
I don't even think that is the appropriate self-management target at this point. I think in that situation, what Lauren, what you're talking about is right on. I think that it shouldn't even be in the realm of possibility, right? I don't get mad that I can't go buy a Maserati. It's not on my token board at all, but being able to the non-behavioral term would be manage your expectations, right? It'd be knowing what you can reasonably trade in for and having that EO function to manage your behavior. All right. Now, side effects of that are, I don't want any of the lower things. I don't want coloring. I don't want to, play a puzzle. I want the computer, right? Someone who does not have a self-management repertoire, that ends in a tantrum. Someone who does have a self-management repertoire, that ends in an increased EO to get more points. All right, so that's again how those two interact. Being able to see the relationship between what you have, what you need, bridge that gap, and use that gap as an establishing operation for target behaviors.
I find it like it's hard for me being in the classroom setting with a lot of students in there where some of them do have those self-management gaps and some of them are fine. I don't know, just because like, let's say I said, no, you don't have enough for this, and they throw a tantrum, and then the other student did have enough, got it. I don't know. It's hard to like bridge those gaps when you have multiple students around too. So
what is your physical token system like? What are you using?
We are using like actual tokens.
Okay. How are they displayed? How do are they in a cup? Are they on a token board?
They're on a board, like with Velcro, like on the desks.
Okay. So and you have like that semi-open system, or is it a closed system based on the definition that I provided earlier? So like, is it 10 tokens or is it like 100 tokens and you just trade in?
That's like it's like a small number of tokens.
Okay.
So is that, I don't remember if that's.
Yeah. So how, if you have the kid that, so like what are the different point values? Like how, you see what I'm saying? So like typically on that closed system, it's when you get to the 10, anything is available. That typically that's how a closed system ends up working.
Yeah, so like one thing that we're implementing earlier this year too is well, this is a specific program that I did with my students that were exhibiting like disruptive behavior, and they had and I was kind of talking about this in our group too, but and I was working with my BCBA with this, where if they it's kind of the opposite where they have the tokens already on their board. Like
Okay.
that's how they started off. And then like if they exhibit the disruptive behavior, they would lose one. So let's say they like get to the end of the period where they would have, you know, that their break or whatever their preferred reinforcer is. If they only have like one left, they could still get access to, let's say it's like computer, like free time on the computer or something, but that would be like, maybe they only get like 2 minutes or 1 minute on that. Whereas if they had all their tokens or maybe only lost one token, you know, they would have more time with that. Which
Got it.
is, so it's a little different than what we were talking where they're just getting more and more tokens, but I'm still having that same issue with, well, you don't have enough time for this, or you don't have enough to get whatever
Yeah.
whatever their preferred reinforcer is.
Okay. So who thinks they know what I'm going to say? Are you guys at that point yet? Probably not.
I don't know.
That's next semester. Next semester, you'll be able to predict what I'm going to say. So the problem there is that you have it's a reinforcement system in that they are accessing reinforcers. But your token system is a response cost system. Your token system is a punishment system. So those students that don't contact punishment gain the most reinforcement. Those students that contact the most punishment get the fewest reinforcers. But the environment that you are creating is one that is governed by punishers. So think about it this way. If I have a kid who, how do I want to put this? All right. I have a kid who does something right, emits a positive target behavior, context reinforcement, target behavior reinforcement, target behavior reinforcement, delta target behavior, so the non-target behavior, no reinforcement, differential reinforcement occurs, target behavior reinforcement, target behavior reinforcement. All right, my time ends. I've behaved 6 times, misbehaved once. All 6 of those times that I behaved were consequated and built the EO for that behavior. And by the time I get to my reinforcer, I've earned 6 minutes. Not that I've had 4 minutes taken away or even 1 minute taken away. I've earned that time and it's now given to me. Now, I didn't get to 10, which is my max, but I earned those pieces that I get, right? Versus target behavior for decrease, target behavior for decrease, target behavior for decrease. I'm at 7 minutes, but the 3 contingencies that I have experienced are punishment, punishment, punishment. So I am in this mindset of already like I have an emotional response of sad because the only contingency that I've contacted is punisher, punisher, punisher. So I'm not excited about the 7 minutes that I earned. What's on my thought process, on my mind, are the 3 minutes that I lost. The kid that earned the 6 minutes, they're thinking, all right, I did this 6 times. Johnny over there only did it 3 times, but I did it 6 times. But I like what Kevin got, so I'm going to do that next time, right? So I don't want to undermine your BCBA, but there are concerns. There are always concerns when you're governing a token system through response cost and punishment procedures versus when you're focusing on those target behaviors to increase. And the way that I would look at it is especially for a kid that's struggling, when they walk in the door, have they earned 10 tokens? No, they have 10 tokens there. Right? Now you have, so the good kid, they can behave great all day, and you as the teacher don't have to say anything to them, and they'll get their reinforcement. The under the radar kid can be under the radar all day, and you as the teacher aren't going to say anything to them, and they're going to get their reinforcer. The bad kid, who needs the most reinforcement, is going to contact punishment all day and lose and lose and lose and lose and lose. This is the red, yellow, green system that we see in most PBIS systems in schools, and it is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. That kid that has the kid that contacts the most punishment is the kid that needs to be contacting the most reinforcement. All right. So I think that, and I'm happy to talk to you specifically about that later if you want to meet and kind of revisit how you might want to change that token system. I think flipping that on its head is going to be a way to help bridge that gap for those kids. Something earned is always, even if it's less, is going to be more powerful than something lost. All right. Make sense? Cool. Any gamblers here?
I'm freaking out over the green, yellow, red system because so like my little brother behaviorally struggled so much, but those systems, like it was never like if he either had green or like in St. James, like they would go all the way to pink. He would go green or he would go pink. Like there was no in between. And it was just now looking back, like, okay, maybe the corrections even they weren't a correction procedure. It was just he wanted attention. He was getting attention, so he was flipping his dot. Like
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
And that seems, as behavior analysts, that concept makes a ton of sense to us. It seems like a very cynical way of looking at it, but it does make sense to us. What I prefer to look at it not in terms of what should be done with that system differently, but rather what conceptually should be in place. And the way that I look at it, and this is what you see and this is what we'll end with, what you see in an advanced token system or point system is that the onus is on the teacher to find the behaviors to allow the kids to contact their reinforcers. I'll say that again. The onus is on the teacher to find the behaviors to allow the kids to contact their reinforcers. Meaning, if my kids start at 0 every day and behave perfectly, and I don't provide any points, it's my fault that they're acting up because I just told them, doesn't matter what you do, you're not getting any points. All right? If my kids behave perfectly all day and I have 25 kids, I'm going to try to do this math really quick. 25 kids, they're each getting 10 points at a time, and I need to get them to 1,000 points, then that would be 2,500 instances of praise per day. Can you imagine that in a classroom? right now, a kid comes in, they literally have to do nothing but follow the directions to contact reinforcement. And the only vocalizations, the only consequence that you have to hear for the system to work is punishment. That's a problem. That's a problem. Start with no reinforcement. The kids have to earn it. That's their half of the deal. And you, the teacher, have to see it. That's your half of the deal. When you do that, you create this massively positive environment that that everyone is able to thrive in. All right. And over time, what happens, and I know we didn't quite get all the way there today, but the kids just learn that these are the behaviors that I get points for. So when they are working independently, they can also be delivering their points independently. Self-management, PSI, advanced systems of reinforcement. All right. Okay. We will leave it there for tonight. I have no idea what you guys will be talking about with Dr. G next week. Let's see. Ooh, curriculum. Yeah, that'll start to be really fun. That'll be really good. Oh God, why do you have to ask that, Taylor? Dr. G and I never got together on that to verify who was doing what. So
That would be next week if it goes as what we were doing on Moodle.
Yeah,
So that's why
yeah.
I'm like, what do we?
And Cece, I think you had reached out to me about that before, and I don't even remember what I said to you. I think we kind of, let's see. Does everyone have someone that is paired with them on?
From another,
No.
from the upper class?
No. I'll talk to Dr. G. We may have to, I don't want to just scrap it. I think here's what I think. Go ahead and keep turning them in as is your week. He and I will get together. I think what we will do is just give you guys a time period where everyone swaps. Everyone give their feedback, and because I want both sides of you to be able to contact that still. I think that it's an important piece that's really, really meaningful. So just hang tight on it. It's not going to be, you don't need to wait until you hear back from your peer tutor to turn it in. But we'll still go through that process. Okay.
My week didn't have any articles, and I realized that my week, once I was going to do it, and I emailed Dr. G about it, but he never got back to me.
Just
'cause
go
he
ahead
didn't ask
and-
me what week.
Just go ahead and pick a different week.
Okay.
Honestly, with the number of you guys that we have in here, we're not. There's plenty of readings that are going without being done. So I think that's totally fine.
All right,
Okay?
thank you.
Sorry about that, Emily. Okay. Any other questions?
Dr. Sherman, for
Yeah.
the data collection.
Yeah.
Is that to be turned in on the exact date? I've sent mine to my mentor. I'm just waiting for it to be returned, but I do see that like in 2 weeks, the second data collection is due.
The data collections have very flexible timelines. We want you to spend the time doing them. Obviously, the earlier you can get them to mentors, the more feedback you can get from them, the better off you're going to be. But yeah, I'm not concerned about like a hard due date and for data collections there. And Dr. G is usually more lenient on due dates than I am. So I feel pretty confident about that. But yeah, take your time. Don't get behind on them, but take your time get it where you want to be, and get it in a reasonable amount of time. Okay. All right. Cool. Anything else? Awesome. Nice job tonight, guys. Yeah,
Now,
go ahead, Heather.
really quick,
Yeah.
for the data collections, I know Dr. Cohane for our decision analysis likes academic skills. Do y'all prefer more of the behavior side of things, or does it matter? Or
It doesn't really matter so much. If I had a choice, I recommend using this opportunity to study a system, whether it is a behavioral system or an academic system, or let's limit it to those two. That doesn't really matter to me. So like I from my own very personal experience, when I was in this class, I can't remember. Yeah, I do remember. So I did a data collection on Edmark. I did a data collection on Morningside Math, and I did a data collection on classified token systems in ABA 2 when I was in grad school. So it's all about the systematic implementation of a system. That's my recommendation for what you guys focus on. If you have something else that you're working on, if you have a different type of project, that's fine. I think that is what allows you to get the most applied content out of this class. Okay. Does that non-answer help?
yeah, I think so.
Good. All right. Have a good one, and I will see you all in a couple weeks. Bye.